Welcome to a deep dive into one of the most chilling chapters of American history, the Salem Witch Trials. This isn't just a spooky tale for Halloween. We're going beyond the surface to explore what made a community turn on itself with such ferocity.
It's a sobering look at how fear, fueled by specific societal conditions, can lead to unimaginable consequences.
And we're lucky to have a rich collection of sources to help us understand what happened. We have court records detailing the accusations, personal letters revealing the anxieties of the time, and even maps of Salem Village, allowing us to visualize the setting where this tragedy played out.
These pieces help us to step back in time and understand the context. Salem Village wasn't some isolated community of the strange and superstitious. It was a typical New England farming village with the usual mix of people and problems.
But those problems weren't just petty squabbles, were they? I've read that land disputes were a major source of tension.
Yes. Land ownership was crucial for survival in those days. You mentioned the Putnams, nurses, porters. These weren't just names on a list of the accused. They were families, deeply intertwined through land ownership. And sometimes those ties were strained by disagreements over boundaries or inheritance.
So there was already a level of distrust simmering beneath the surface of this seemingly peaceful village.
Exactly. And it's important to remember the dominant role religion played in their lives. The church wasn't just a building, it was the heart of the community, dictating not only their spiritual lives, but influencing social and political decisions.
Which makes the accusations of witchcraft all the more potent. It wasn't just a personal attack, it was a strike at the very core of their belief system. Social order.
Absolutely. Challenging someone's piety was akin to challenging their entire world.
And to make matters worse, I understand there were conflicts brewing with neighboring towns, creating a sense of being outsiders, even victims.
That's right. Salem Village had disputes with Salem Town, arguments over boundaries and representation, even incidents of violence. This created a feeling of being under siege, of being misunderstood and wronged by the outside world.
So we have a community already grappling with internal tensions and external pressures. It sounds like a tinderbox, waiting for a spark.
And that spark, sadly, came in the form of the belief in witchcraft, a belief deeply rooted in the intellectual and religious framework of the time.
You're talking about demonology.
Right.
I find it so difficult to grasp that this wasn't just some fringe belief, but a core part of their worldview.
It's essential to understand that demonology in the 17th century wasn't the stuff of ghost stories. It was considered a legitimate science, a way of explaining the unexplainable. Think of the writings of Cotton Mather and his father, Increase, prominent figures who firmly believed in the existence of witches and the devil's active role in the world. These weren't crackpots on the fringes of society. They were respected intellectuals.
So from their perspective, they were facing a very real, very dangerous enemy. Not some abstract force, but a tangible evil that could infiltrate their homes and their very souls.
Precisely. And this fear wasn't just theoretical. They had concrete examples, like the witch trials in England and other colonies, stories that served as both warnings and confirmations of their deepest anxieties.
It's disturbing to imagine living with that level of constant fear and suspicion.
Indeed. And to understand their actions, we need to understand the beliefs that shaped their perceptions. For instance, the concept of the witches' compact wasn't some fantastical notion to them. It was a terrifyingly real possibility.
Can you explain that a bit further? What exactly did they believe this compact entailed?
They believed that a person, usually out of desperation or malice, could literally make a deal with the devil, trading their soul for supernatural powers. This pact would then enable them to inflict harm on others, often through invisible means.
So even something as simple as a bad harvest or a sudden illness could be attributed to the actions of a witch, someone who had made this dark bargain.
Exactly. And it wasn't just abstract harm they feared, the belief in specters, or the ability of a witch's spirit to detach and torment others, even from afar, was widespread.
So even if you hadn't directly interacted with an accused witch, you could still believe yourself to be a victim of their evil influence.
That's right. And with that level of fear permeating the community, it doesn't take much to imagine how an accusation could quickly spiral into mass hysteria.
Which brings us to the event that would light the fuse, so to speak, the strange occurrences in the household of Reverend Samuel Parris.
From what I've gathered, Parris himself was a controversial figure, even before the accusations began.
Yes, he was known for being quite demanding, and quick to find fault with his parishioners. There were disputes over his salary, complaints about his sermons, even disagreements about his firewood allowance. He wasn't exactly a unifying force in the community.
So you have this already tense atmosphere. Then you add in a figure of authority who seems to exacerbate those divisions. It's almost as if the stage was being set for conflict. And the conflict wouldn't be long in coming. It began with a group of young women in Paris's household, including his daughter, Abigail, and niece, Abigail Williams, who started exhibiting bizarre behavior.
The infamous fits.
Right.
Were those actually physical ailments, or was there an element of performance involved?
Hard to say for certain. The descriptions from the time paint a picture of contortions, screaming, trance-like states. Whether these were genuine medical conditions, psychological breakdowns, or some combination of both is difficult to determine centuries later.
But at the time, these fits were quickly attributed to supernatural causes, specifically witchcraft.
Of course, remember, this was a community primed to see the devil's hand in everything, and when these fits began to spread beyond Paris's immediate family, affecting other young women in the village, the fear intensified.
And that's when the finger of blame fell on Tituba, an enslaved woman in the Paris household.
Yes. Tituba, likely terrified and under immense pressure, confessed to practicing witchcraft and even implicated others in the community. This confession, while almost certainly coerced, sent shockwaves through Salem village.
It's tragic to think of Tituba, someone already marginalized by her status as an enslaved person, becoming the scapegoat, the first domino to fall in this horrific chain of events.
Her confession, along with the escalating fits and accusations from the young women, created a sense of panic. People were genuinely terrified, convinced that a dark force had taken root in their midst.
So, from a seemingly ordinary village, with its everyday tensions, we see the rapid rise of fear and paranoia, all fueled by a deeply held belief in the power of the devil and the reality of witchcraft.
And as we'll see, that fear would soon lead to a series of events that would forever stain the name of Salem. With Tituba's confession, the floodgates opened. It legitimized the fears that had been simmering for months.
It's as if her confession confirmed their worst nightmares. Suddenly the threat wasn't abstract anymore. It had a name, a face, and it lived among them.
And the legal system at the time, instead of acting as a safeguard against injustice, became a tool for amplifying the hysteria.
From what I've read about the trials, the concept of a fair trial, as we understand it today, was practically non-existent.
You're absolutely right. Imagine being dragged before a court, facing your accusers, without any right to legal representation, without even a clear understanding of the charges against you.
And the evidence used to convict these individuals was often based on hearsay, personal grudges, and, most chillingly, spectral evidence.
The reliance on spectral evidence is perhaps the most disturbing aspect of these trials, the idea that a witch's spirit could detach from their body and torment others, even from afar, was taken as fact.
So someone could literally be condemned based on someone else's dream or vision.
Essentially, yes. If an accuser claimed to see your spirit attacking them, that was considered valid evidence against you. There was no way to disprove such a claim.
It's mind-boggling to think that such intangible, unverifiable evidence could have such dire consequences.
And remember, the court officials, the judges and magistrates, were not immune to the prevailing beliefs of the time. They saw the devil's hand at work and believed they were doing God's work by rooting out this evil.
It's a stark reminder of how even those in positions of authority can be swept up in mass hysteria.
Let's delve into some specific cases that highlight the tragic absurdity of these trials. Take Bridget Bishop, the first person executed in Salem. The evidence against her was largely based on rumors about her eccentric behavior and unconventional dress.
So being different, standing out from the crowd, could literally get you killed.
In those times, yes. Then there's the case of Rebecca Nurse, a respected, elderly woman known for her piety. She was condemned almost entirely, based on spectral evidence, despite the fact that even some supporters of the trials began to doubt her guilt.
Her case seems to highlight the indiscriminate nature of the accusations. Anyone, regardless of age or social standing, could become a target.
Absolutely. And once the trials gained momentum, they became self-perpetuating. Accused witches, under duress and often promised leniency, were pressured to confess and name others.
It created a vicious cycle of accusations and confessions, fueling the paranoia and widening the net of suspicion.
Precisely. And those who dared to question the validity of the trials or the evidence being presented, they risked becoming targets themselves.
Were there any voices of dissent during this period? Anyone who tried to push back against the tide of hysteria?
There were a few brave souls. Robert Pike, a local magistrate, openly questioned the use of spectral evidence. Reverend John Wise, a minister from Ipswich, circulated a petition arguing for a fairer legal process.
But it seems those voices were largely drowned out by the clamor for convictions.
Sadly, yes. It took a significant shift in public opinion, coupled with the growing unease of some influential figures before the fervor began to subside.
What finally brought an end to this dark chapter? Was it a sudden realization of the injustice, or were there other factors involved?
It was a gradual process as the accusations spread beyond Salem Village, reaching into more prominent families, and even implicating some government officials. The cracks in the narrative began to show.
So it was only when the hysteria threatened those in power that people began to question the legitimacy of the trials.
It certainly seems that way. The governor, concerned about the escalating chaos and the potential for wider unrest, intervened and ordered a review of the trial.
And what about the aftermath? Was there any attempt to right the wrongs, to offer justice to those who'd been wrongly accused and convicted?
In the years that followed, there were apologies, expressions of remorse, even some financial restitution offered to the families of those who had been executed.
But it's hard to imagine any amount of apology or compensation truly making amends for such a profound injustice. The scars of those events must have run deep.
Indeed. The Salem Witch Trials serve as a chilling reminder of the fragility of reason and the devastating consequences of unchecked fear and intolerance.
But they also highlight the courage of those few individuals who dared to speak out against the tide of injustice, even when doing so put their own lives at risk.
Their stories are a testament to the enduring power of conscience and the importance of challenging authority when it veers off course.
It's fascinating and disturbing to think about how these trials reflected the anxieties and power dynamics of that era.
Absolutely. The Salem Witch Trials weren't just about individual accusations. They were a symptom of deeper societal tensions.
Like what?
Well, for one, there was the issue of gender roles. Most of the accused were women, often those who were seen as defying social norms, like those who were outspoken, independent, or economically successful.
So the trials were, in a sense, a way of reinforcing patriarchal control.
It's certainly one interpretation. The accusations often targeted women who challenged the established power structures, either through their words, actions, or simply by existing outside of the prescribed roles.
And then there were the economic anxieties you mentioned earlier, the land disputes, the fear of scarcity, the competition for resources. Did that play a role in fueling the accusations?
Undoubtedly. When people are struggling to survive, they're more likely to look for scapegoats, someone to blame for their misfortunes. And in Salem, those who were already marginalized or perceived as different became easy targets.
It's a classic pattern, isn't it? Fear and uncertainty create fertile ground for prejudice and persecution.
Exactly. And the Salem Witch Trials provide a stark example of how quickly those impulses can spiral out of control, leading to the erosion of reason and the perversion of justice.
We've talked about the accused and the accusers. But what about those who stood by and watched this unfold? Was there no sense of collective responsibility, of shared guilt in the aftermath?
There was certainly a reckoning as the fervor subsided and the truth of the injustices became undeniable. Many in Salem and the surrounding communities were forced to confront their own roles in the tragedy.
Did that lead to any lasting changes, any reforms to prevent such a thing from happening again?
The Salem Witch Trials marked a turning point in American legal history. The widespread use of spectral evidence was discredited, and there was a growing movement toward greater due process and fairer trial procedures.
So, in a way, the tragedy of Salem paved the way for some positive changes in the justice system.
Yes, but it's crucial to remember that the scars of those events run deep. The names of those who were wrongly accused and executed serve as a constant reminder of the dangers of mass hysteria and the importance of safeguarding individual rights.
And it's a story that continues to resonate today, isn't it? We may not be burning witches at the stake,
Yeah.
but we still grapple with the same issues of fear, prejudice, and the abuse of power.
Absolutely. The Salem Witch Trials are not just a historical event, they are a reflection of the dark side of human nature, a warning about the fragility of reason, and the ever-present potential for injustice to take root, even in the most seemingly civilized societies.
It's a sobering thought, but a necessary one. We can't afford to forget the lessons of Salem. We need to be vigilant in challenging injustice, in questioning authority, and in defending those who are vulnerable to persecution. It's a responsibility we all share. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the Salem Witch Trials. We'll be back soon with another exploration of history, ideas, and the human experience. Until then, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep those critical thinking skills sharp.